Former gang members, what made you leave? Has your past ever come back to haunt you? I used to have a very serious substance problem. Coupled with the fact that I grew up in a rough hood, it was inevitable. Basically, I needed protection and substances, but like most people here pointing out, eventually you just get too old for that crap. Kicked my habit several years ago. Found an amazing girl and realized I didn't have to stay in such a dangerous spot. Moved out to the mountains, and aside from my police record and my ongoing struggle with fixation, I left those demons back in the city. For real, though, you can leave your hood so easily if you want to. Took me so long to realize that. Congratulations, man. Proud of you, stranger. Story 2. Personally, I ended up getting out because I realized the pattern I was falling into. Before I even turned 18, I had 6 charges on my record. 2 of them felonies, and I was on third strike, which basically means if I commit another crime, I can be locked away for life automatically, and any nonviolent crime, no matter how small it is, can be an automatic 7 years if they choose. As of right now, since my charges were all between the ages of 13 to 16, I've been told if I don't get in trouble for the next 10 years after my last charge, 2013, I can get my records expunged. So that's what I'm aiming for at the moment, but it's crazy knowing any little thing can send me back for such a long time because of how stupid I was as a teen. A lot of my friends never got the chance to get out. One of my friends is doing 12 years. He's been in there since he was 17, and another one is doing life, so I'm just glad I got out before that happened, but I still have to be careful. Story 3. I used to chill with a very renowned US gang who grew up together because they were nice guys to me, and they had great substance prices. Plus, who doesn't want real 30-plus-year-old gang members to have your back when you're a friendless minority? I'm white, going to an extremely low-income high school. I remember coming home and homie being in my house doing nothing except scraping his grinder with a pocket knife. He also had his pistol on the table. That's pretty obnoxious even today. Like, bruh, I know you're about that life. You don't gotta flex on me like that. I can still hear him today. But you didn't expect to come home and see that motions to gun, did you? Bro, I totally expect that at this point. And this guy, Gangster 1, would always get intoxicated and tell me that I don't know crap about life or God, while also crying to me about people he's ended. I try to empathize, but this becomes a chore when you hear it several times per month. Gangster 2 was the pusher. Most quality crap in town. These guys would hang out together since childhood. So I would go over to number 2's house, who's also 30 plus and has been in the game 20 plus, and just get amazing substances while listening to them tell me who they pulled up on. Example, kids walking around in the blue in their neighborhood, so he warns them with strong words. Sees them in a bigger group a couple minutes later and pulls his AK on them and tells them they need to leave now. Anyways, this was all great fun for me as a kid or young adult, but then there was this fight, and my brother was involved. I was hanging out with him in a bar fight, then a shootout broke out. My brother tells me he fought, but the gang members later came over to the house and chided him for disappearing during the fight. Some people got hurt, and Gangster 1 and 2 hopped in their cars and continued the shootout with the other gang while they were driving. Anyways, it was then that I realized that my brother shouldn't have to apologize for running from that situation, which I believe he did. Screw getting hurt over some dumb crap like that. So it was kind of then that I realized I could get pulled up if I was hanging out with these guys. I broke ties. They weren't extremely happy. They frequently knocked on my door and talked to me about how what I'm doing isn't cool, but they never threatened me. So I really believe that they were literally being as nice as they possibly could. Anyways, I stopped talking to them about 5 or 6 years ago when I moved to another town. Sometimes I talk to them on Facebook, though. Some of the friends I made through them ended up terminated by rival gangs. Not because of me. It's really hard, man. It really makes me see how pointless violence is. Oh yeah, he also got a shotgun pulled on me. Like the dude cocked it and aimed it right at me. In public. And the cops never showed up after they were called, so that wasn't awesome. Anyways, I might have to put too much info on here, so I don't know if I'll keep this up. I would just say to you youngins, it's really not worth it. Like, at all. You can make like a few $100 extra per week, but you can also just get hurt for some dumb reason. Story 4. I was involved in one of the groups. I left around 2006, a few months after I got attacked on a rural road by 2 carloads of guys who had meant to shut down our delivery phone. They got one of our customers to call us on a Sunday morning when they knew most of the people I'd call for backup would be sleeping. If it wasn't for some fancy driving on my part, I would have gotten hurt by 8 guys with bats and batons. I'm glad I got out when I did, because even though people were harming each other prior to me leaving, they got really comfortable with it in the years after I left. Past doesn't really come back to haunt me. Moved away to grow grass in a different area, and there wasn't any in it for life mentality. In 2011, I moved back to the area. Most of my friends and enemies are either in jail or working square jobs for the most part. I work in the hydroponic supplies industry, so I still work with a lot of gangsters from the industry, but they're mostly chill dudes who want to work out all the time and play with expensive motorsports toys. Story 5. Brazilian here. I was a teenager in the mid-2000s. I used to hang out with a lot of other kids who were also lower middle class and had a lot of time and liberty to be on the streets causing havoc. A lot of them were hooligans. In Brazil, hooligans are really common in major cities with big football teams, but it's somewhat different from those in Europe. People hang out in the torcidas organizadas, wear uniforms, sometimes carry guns, and fight over petty crap with people from other torcidas. The main goal is to beat and steal other crews' materials, like shirts, hats, flags, and this kind of crap. It's not uncommon to see people pass away over this ridiculous nonsense. Anyway, it was a large gang, but no one did heavy stuff, like ending people, even though sometimes someone was packing a revolver or a pistol. At least I never heard of anything like that. We used to hurt the crap of other people from other hoods, though. Some of us were really violent. A lot of my friends trained martial arts just for the sake of kicking people's backs on the street. I stopped hanging around because some of my friends got arrested and they just didn't give a single crap even after jail. Some of them also sold grass, and I began to wake up to the fact that crap was getting more serious. I had a lot of doubts before, after seeing people get wrecked over nothing. Like random street fights were common. I saw a couple of random dudes getting hurt, people threatening others with firearms. I chose to focus on school. And years later, I'm a lawyer with no criminal background, thankfully. My friends from that time are doing okay, I guess. They're alive, and I think that's a good thing, considering what they used to do and how many enemies they made. Story 6. In junior high, I used to hang out with the D's. These nuts. I grew up with them when they were juniors. I dated a few, partied with them, hung out, and played kick the can, etc. We weren't full-fledged teens yet, so we just got to be silly kids. Fast forward 2 years, around 15, they had to get jumped in, sell substances, carry straps, protect the block, and I stopped hanging out with them. 2 or 3 of them would still come to my house to hang out, and I could tell they weren't fond of their new expectations. They would call the cops on their own gang activity so they could take a day off and claim it's too hot. When I brought over my new high school friends and they all met, they fit in fine. They could have been regular kids. But the pressure became apparent when we would make plans and they couldn't come to the beach, pools, Six Flags, etc. There were days that the whole gang went, and that was out of protection. They did go out with us once in a while, and to me, it was so normal. They were just a little older, but still the same goofy kids I grew up with. They didn't challenge anyone's affiliations. They didn't charge us for the grass. They could have been regular teens. Fast forward 2 more years, and the full-fledged boys in blue and black had dropped out. Started hanging out with older gang members and proving themselves. I'd already stopped talking to them, but heard through the grapevine that one was ended. Another was in jail, and the third was running from a warrant for armed robbery. They became the stereotype. Misogynistic, ignorant, rude, crimey dudes who ignore like bums. All because older dudes took advantage of them and their willingness to prove themselves. They were decent kids at first. They didn't leave. The gang left them. Story 7. I used to be a big brother in a certain chivalrous organization. There were a combination of factors for my departure. Chief among them was that I had a serious problem with the newer generations and how they perceived power, and quite frankly, I grew tired. Of those that joined our ranks who were from the newer generations, they did not understand basic concepts of honor, respect, or dignity, which added pressure to an increasingly volatile territorial issue that we were facing. They didn't seem to understand that violence was only meant to be a tool, not just the way we handled every interaction with everybody that we encountered. It filled a niche that law enforcement weren't traditionally able to accommodate. But there was obviously a darker side to our work, and some people were neither mentally nor psychologically capable of handling the dual nature of our existence in society. There was what I'd consider a huge war that erupted a few decades ago, and one of the bosses of a large chivalrous organization had passed away naturally of a heart attack. This left a power vacuum that wasn't meant to stay empty, because of the ambitions of several men who felt that it was their right to step up and fill that absence. Long story short, there were many of us who were ended and seriously injured. I was injured several times during all of this, but managed to survive. At this point, I decided that I'd had enough. I'd been learning English, Russian, and German, working on becoming fluent in those languages, which is very difficult. During the chaos of the fallout of what had happened, I grabbed my rainy day fund and fled the country to live abroad. Since then, I have lived simply, without the ostentatious displays of wealth and power that I had been accustomed to. I hated every minute of it initially and wept bitterly over the loss of my possessions, my lifestyle, my brothers, my home. And I work as a baker, living a much simpler but more satisfying life. Now I'm raising a daughter. I stay away from nightlife, which is incompatible with my work hours and trying to be a responsible parent. I don't drink or smoke anymore. I'm friendly with the people I work with and with customers, but I never talk about myself, preferring instead to ask them questions about themselves. People will tell you anything if you show interest when they talk about themselves, which was one of the key tools I learned back in my past life. So far, no repercussions from the past as far as I can tell, which is more than what I deserve, if I'm being honest. I imagine someday everything will catch up with me, but I want to shield my daughter from all of that as much as I can. I want her memories of me to be favorable. I want her to believe that I'm a boring person who has banal routines and simple pleasures. Story 8. Met my now wife. Cleaned myself up. She showed me I could be better than what I was. Got out, had to leave the state. I'd gone into some trouble boosting cars. Asked the judge if I could join the military. The rest is history. This was back in '93. I do not regret it. Some of my former banger friends found me on Facebook years later. Most are gone and or in prison. The ones not got out too. It's just crazy to think of what I would have become. Story 9. I was in one of the largest and most feared Mexican gangs in Los Angeles, but the crazy thing was that no one outside of my close friends and cousins knew. To the outside world, I was a baby-faced kid with a comb-over who was enrolled in honors classes his entire life. What made me leave was the fact that I lived by my own code. I did not jump people, I didn't tag, and I didn't steal. And a lot of other members did not like that. My cousins and uncles were shot callers, so I was somewhat safe, but I quickly found myself looking over my shoulder. When you're in a gang, you're paranoid as crap. I was originally recruited for my brain and muscle. These, however, ultimately pulled me away from the gang life. I ended up getting accepted to colleges and took up boxing and MMA. The final push was when I became a Christian my senior year of high school. Now I'm currently double majoring in theological studies and computer science. As for my past coming back to haunt me, I did see a ghost the other day. I was on my way to work at 4 a.m. and heard a skateboard rolling behind me, and I noticed its speed was irregular. I learned this after years of paranoia. I clenched my fist, ready for some fool to try to mug me. But then I heard someone say my name. It was my best friend from high school. His family was from a notorious Salvadorian gang. I say I saw a ghost because he was a shell of what he used to be. He ended up getting spiked in his own supply, being kicked out of his house and harmed by the gang for stealing. His dad was a shot caller. He would have been terminated if not for that. That's my story and the story of so many poor first-generation Latino Americans from the hood. Story 10. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I got arrested when I was 16 and charged with felony counts. It was reduced and I got my record expunged. After that, and figuring out the people or friends I hang out with pretty much abandoned me right after the arrest, I got serious with my studies in school and stayed away from fights, getting in trouble, etc. I think it has also made me more mindful and mature growing up, since I wasn't too into parties anymore and hanging out. Although it's definitely made me more conflicted with interpersonal relationships and trust, even today. I still don't completely trust the legal system and cops, especially remembering when I was handcuffed and chained with others. My group. I walked out of the precinct and into the police car to be ushered to jail. At any rate, the only real time it has come to haunt me was being forced to put it into my law school applications. Even if a record is expunged, apparently I still need to write it in and write an explanation. It hasn't affected my admission cycle, but I was pretty shocked, but of course not surprised since records don't just appear even after being expunged. Story 11. Prison sucked, and I knocked up a friendly girl, so it was starting to seem like a dumb life plan. That's why I stopped. I wasn't actually a patcher member, though. More what you could call a sympathizer or employee. The worst way it ever came back to haunt me was bumping into an old work colleague in the streets 15 years later when I was walking with my daughter. "Steve, yo man, you got any substance by any chance?" Dude, seriously? It's been 15 years and I'm pushing a goddamn stroller. No, I freaking don't. Go away, idiot. Jeez, I guess you haven't changed. I would have thought that 8-year stretch you did might have taught you something, but I guess not. Bye. And that was that. Also the occasional cop who thinks he's clever. "Oh, I see here that you were arrested in 1994. Dude, screw you. You weren't even out of your dad's bag in 1994. I've been clean for longer than you've been a cop. Shut up and leave me alone. Oh, but you see, the fact that you've never applied for a pardon and have a clean record since just tells us you got smarter at the substance game. No, schmuck. Pardons are just super freaking expensive, and I've never felt the need to get one. That life is so far behind me that I honestly just forgot." Story 12. My mom used to run with a gang in one of the larger suburbs of Chicago when she was very young, 15 or 16. She said that one of the last things that she did with these people was steal guns from her friend's dad, and then at gunpoint in the van they were in, got told she was going to rob a convenience store. She did. My grandmother found out and put my mother in a mental hospital for protection and then placed in witness protection of sorts. Moved downstate and she hasn't really been back. It's a time that my mom really doesn't talk about too much, but when she does, it carries extra weight. Story 13. This will probably get buried, but here goes. During high school, I was best friends with this guy, Mike. Mike was a really mouthy kid, though, and would run his mouth to a group of kids that lived in the co-op across the street from our bus stop. Running his mouth turned into a couple small fights. Mostly the kind of high school fights where everyone stands around mouthing off but not actually throwing punches. Some days, the co-op kids would be waiting for Mike to get off the bus, so every afternoon when the bus dropped us off, we would check to see if these kids were there waiting. If they were, then a group of us would all get off the bus because we wanted to have his back and make sure that he didn't get jumped. This went on for a pretty long time before some of the co-op kids started bringing baseball bats and threatening us with them. I think they were just trying to look tough, and I'm not sure that they would have actually done anything, since most of the fighting up to that point was really just standing around and screaming at each other. But when Mike's older cousin, who was in his 20s, heard about the baseball bats, he went ballistic and showed up the next day with a bat of his own and harmed one of the co-op kids. That was the tipping point right there. Now these co-op kids started getting their older brothers and cousins involved too. About a week later, Mike got jumped and hurt by a couple guys with bats and steel-toed shoes and spent a couple days in the hospital. Mike's cousin got a couple of his older friends involved, and before we knew it, people were getting jumped and getting the crap kicked out of them on both sides. We didn't go anywhere alone anymore and usually brought a group of friends and some of the older guys with us. Anytime someone from our group was attacked or older guys would retaliate, which would cause the other side to retaliate, it was just a circle. Didn't feel like I was in a gang at the time. It just felt like we had a group of older guys protecting us, but looking back, I would definitely now say that it was a gang. The problem was that you couldn't just get out of it if you wanted to. If I'd cut off ties with my group and the older guys, I would have had nobody to protect me and I would have got the crap kicked out of me by the co-op kids. Thankfully, I got into college and left town. During my first year of college, my family moved so I didn't have to go back and deal with the gang BS anymore. And a couple years after I left, I heard that things had really escalated. One of the co-op kids was terminated and one of the older guys on our side was being into a coma and passed away. Mike and his cousin started dealing grass by the pound, and his cousin was eventually busted and took the fall for that and went to jail. I don't think anyone in my group considered it to be a gang, even though it was. So they were all understanding when I left for college and when my family moved. I don't keep in touch with any of them except for Mike, and even then, it's just an occasional Facebook message to see how he's doing. That was all about 7 to 8 years ago, and my past hasn't come back to haunt me. Although I'm still very wary that I'll run into a couple of the co-op kids someday and they'll still have a grudge against me. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 14. For a lot of people, joining a gang is a necessity to survive their neighborhood. Once they leave that neighborhood, they no longer need the gang to survive. The same goes for prison. Many people are coaxed into gangs as the safer alternative to being alone to fend for themselves in a dangerous area. Gangs are mostly labeled as such by outsiders. We were all just neighborhood guys who became friends. I grew up on the West Coast in Cali, where people use colors to differentiate between neighborhoods. My grandfather grew up in the Bronx during the early 1900s. One day we were sitting around watching a documentary on New York mobsters. My grandfather looked over and said, "These guys on TV were just neighborhood guys, living that neighborhood lifestyle. Now they're being idolized on TV as something special, but they were just neighborhood guys trying to get by." We were born into this lifestyle, and groups were created as protection, and they also created an economic ecosystem within the groups. We made money with each other and spent money with each other. When a group controls a neighborhood, then a hierarchy must be established within that group, just like the military or government. Gangs sprout up in neighborhoods when a group of kids around the same age all begin hanging out together. During the substance epidemic, these gangs became infiltrated with violence, because money breeds envy and envy breeds violence. I still hang out with my group of friends. Conflict has arisen within our group and people have been left out. Most of the violence is resolved using fists, but some of the people close to me had to do something worse to enter their groups. Put someone in the news headlines. When I was 16, I met one of the head guys of the largest gangs in Northern California. I was fresh out of the Pelican Bay shoe program and looking for recruits in the streets. I allowed him to give me a tattoo. In case I ever ended up in prison, everyone would know my affiliation. Yes, at 16, I prepared for a life of crime by aligning myself with a prison gang, in case I went to prison. Thankfully, I never reached that point. As time goes on, people age and the bond between neighborhood friends dissolve. Most of us don't leave a gang, we just grow up to become responsible adults. The ones that get left behind are gone, in jail, or outed by other group members. Prisoners are forced to stay in the lifestyle, becoming the next generation of leaders. Story 15. I saved up enough money to put myself through school and to not have to work. All I wanted was enough money to get out. 5 years later, I got my master's degree and now I work as an economist in the social services sector. Haunt me? Yeah. When I went to university, I changed my Facebook name back to my real name. This guy who tried to end me back in the day that I got word on and got the drop on got in touch with me asking if I remembered him. Seeing as how I injured the guy instead of ending him, at the time I caught serious heat for this because it was construed as weakness. I thought I was getting ready to settle the score. I got in touch with my boys back home and they paid him a visit because nothing, and I mean nothing, was going to stand in my way of living a normal life. Turns out he wanted to reach out to me to thank me for sparing his life and that he had turned his around. So my boys thought that was pretty funny and I had to PayPal them all steak dinners and booze money. Story 16. When I was in kinder, I met one of my best friends. We grew up together and were close as brothers. Around 13 though, there was a noticeable divide. His cousins and many of his friends got involved in a local Mexican gang, got pretty deep into it. I was always hanging out with them, so I was around that gang crap for a while too. Got to the point that I was usually with a group of them when we were out and about, and actually almost got into some major whoopings because of it. The thing is, as deep as they were into this crap, they knew that I was not and so actively avoided getting into crap when I was around. They said I was soft and didn't want to see me get hurt because of them or something like that. One day I told them, screw it, I want in. I was always with them anyway, and I was down. They looked at me and were like, nah, this crap ain't for you, bro. I was adamant that it was. I wanted to be in, and I wanted to be as deep as they were. Anyway, eventually there came a day when one of these guys was walking home from high school by himself. He was jumped, harmed, all kinds of crap. That is when I realized that, yeah, this crap is not for me. Luckily, I had not been introduced, so I could just walk away from it all. I'm glad I never got into it. I've not seen a lot of those guys since then. As for the kid who was my best friend since kindergarten, he never made it to 19. He was harmed and left him in the middle of a cold, dark street. Story 17. Not really sure if I'd classify it as a gang. What I was a part of was more of a group of people looking out for each other, which is something all gang members say, so I might as well share my reasons. At 25 years old, I realized I wasn't happy in my current relationship and moved on. When I met my now fiancée, I didn't want to spend a day without her, so really try to stay off any radar and haven't really turned back to that scene to hang out because I don't want my lady to see that side of me. We watched a documentary about a group I used to affiliate with and she couldn't ever imagine me now being who I was then. Just my personal experience. Also, at the age of 15, I joined a juvenile prison gang that was brought in from the streets. I didn't stick with it when I got out of juvenile prison though. Story 18. My story is a little different because I was never introduced into a gang, but I was affiliated. When I was a young girl, my family was really dysfunctional. I had no guidance or support whatsoever and often had to turn to strangers for places to live. The gang took me in, particularly a boyfriend and his cruel and mentally ill father who allowed it. You can't associate with one gang and then jump to another without consequence. I stuck around and became known as one of them, to the point that rival gangs recognized me and targeted me because of it. I was arrested several times, had been threatened by a police officer, was harmed. One night we had a party and another gang shot through the front window of our house. 13 rounds with semi-automatics. My boyfriend was injured but survived. I missed a bullet by a second. Believe it or not, this was not when I decided to leave. The turning point for me was while in juvenile detention. I was serving time for a minor crime and was to be released. No one in my family would take me at first. The state told me I was going to be placed in a home for troubled kids. It was then and there that I realized that if I had passed away in that incident, no one would have cared and my life would be a total waste. I don't want that for myself. Ultimately, my grandparents agreed to take me in and I never went back to that life. It's been many years now, so I don't worry about what may happen if someone recognized me anymore. I was contacted a few times by old friends who had tracked me down. I went to the funeral of my best friend who was ended in the street in front of the old house. But it's been years since I've seen or spoken to anyone from the old neighborhood. My life is very different now. Story 19. Growing up in the projects in Chicago, you kind of realize if you don't join a gang, you'll get your bum beat by both gangs at school. If you join it, then you'll have to constantly be around someone because if you're alone, you're screwed. But that's in school. But in the streets, you try to stay home, but that's hard to do as a kid. Folks will want to do drive-bys. Mostly the older cats who know kids want to get attention. Nowadays, from what I see, your gang affiliation isn't as critical as just wanting to spread evil and do crappy things. I see rival gang members hanging out. There's not much leadership. It's good and it's bad. It's good in that gang affiliation matters less than what area you're in. It's bad in that there's no leadership. The whole gang aspect is even less critical. I wasn't huge even when I was young, but it's less so now.
Guys are more focused on dealing, and that means more guns and a more volatile lifestyle. But all this is enveloped inside a pocket created by politicians and police. There's no innocent party. Story 20. I had two sets of friends. There were the kids that I grew up with, and there was the gang that I became a part of. I was all in, fiercely committed to my brothers, and I thought they were to me. I alienated the people I grew up with. During this time, I was in a serious relationship and got engaged. Long story short, she passed away from leukemia. I was devastated. I turned to my brothers for support and couldn't have been less interested. I was dealing with a loss horribly. The friend that I grew up with began to take notice and were there for me 100% despite me acting like a schmuck to them. After that, I decided to slip away from that lifestyle and focused on the people that cared for me. I never looked back. Story 21. So this is about my sister's husband. My family lived in the inner city of LA. I'm the youngest of 5. My sister is the second oldest. Long story short, at about 14, my sister started dating a guy, a gangster who was 16 years old. This guy's entire family were gangsters. Brothers, uncles, cousins. It wasn't until years later when my sister gave birth to their son and a rival gang shot at their car multiple times. A bullet went 3 inches from the top of the car seat and my brother-in-law got hurt in the shoulder. Then my sister had enough. My sister told him, "You leave the gang or you'll never see us again." Months later, at a kickback, gang party, he mentioned to a homie that he might try to get out. This homie went and told the other guys and they began to hurt him. What saved him was all of his family members being there and turning their guns on their own gang. They dragged him out into a hospital. Months stay there, one of his cousins getting ended by his own gang. And threats to his family, my family, and him were what led to our entire family leaving the LA area. I witnessed a lot of the gang life. Please, all you youngsters reading this, it's not what you think. 90% will snitch you out. The 10% that don't or won't are the ones that will end you for the gang. Story 22. I used to hang out with a gang. If I was an official member or not is debatable. The best friend, on the other hand, had a tattoo and everything, pledging his allegiance to the gang. I simply didn't see the thrill of hanging around, drinking beer, having the cops pull up to search everybody a couple of times a day, and chasing some guy that they didn't know out of the neighborhood and saying that we were protecting the hood. So I pretty much stopped hanging out with him. I was nerdy and low-key enough where my lack of presence wasn't noticed much. I may have also been lucky that most of the members I knew before they were gang members, and they knew I would have rather been hanging out at the arcade playing video games versus getting intoxicated. Story 23. In high school, I got involved with the local punk scene. I went to a lower rent high school, and a lot of us would go to the punk or SKA or hardcore shows at the local JCs. After going to a few shows, I started talking to this kid, Nathan, who sold grass. He showed me a bunch of underground, at the time, punk bands, and I stopped hanging out with my friends from school and started hanging out with the real punks. These kids were serious. Most of them were homeless, did hard substances, sewing needle tattoos. As cheesy as it was, their gang was named after the gang in suburbia, the Rejected, TR. But they were TA, the Abandoned. There was another local rival punk gang, consisting of older kids who were more tenured in the world of crime. They called themselves Evil Dead, which is probably the coolest gang name I've ever heard. I was robbed by Edie at gunpoint for stopping by their punk house to drop my friend off. My friend was looking for a stolen drum set and was asking the local bands and punks if they had seen it. Evil Dead had seen it because it was stolen by them. They took my car and went joyriding with me in it. In the end, they only took like $4 and change, an old MP3 player, and my friend's pack of menthols. About 2 years into it, I dropped out of high school. Soon after, I got sent to a psych facility for a few days. After getting out, the TA punk stole some beer and got intoxicated with me to celebrate. We went into a hardcore show, and some of the local straight-edge hardcore kids at the Snow didn't take kindly to my intoxicated shenanigans or my burned Confederate flag backpatch, and 4 of them harmed to unconsciousness. I was told later that the TA guys went in to avenge me and had their bum harmed too. A week later, they blamed me for starting the whole thing, and they hurt the crap out of me and did some other things I'd rather not mention here. That was my formal goodbye. Nathan coded a few years back. One of the other guys is now a semi-famous Tumblr crust punk. A couple of the other guys are still touring with their moderately famous band, and the rest of them have continued to be punk as heck. I turned my crap around and mostly just write code and drink beers. Occasionally, I'll put on some Black Flag, but it's mostly Frank Ocean these days. The past doesn't come back, really. I was never really a hardcore gangster and never really did any crime other than fistfights and beer runs. Just hung around crappy people. I've got a couple of embarrassing punk rock tattoos, and there are a couple of bars I avoid. I apologize to my parents for being a crappy teenager. Story 24. My husband's friend is in a gang and is currently in the hospital being treated for a wound. As fourth in the past year. He's 32 now and says he wants out but doesn't have the resources to move away. He's never had a job other than selling substances and dropped out in the 10th grade. He also has an extensive criminal record and no driver's license, so it isn't like he can just go find a great paying job tomorrow. He's been in and out of jail his entire life and goes back every few months. When he gets out, he's nowhere to go except back to the gang. That's the cycle a lot of them get caught up in and probably the reason why a lot of them stay. They live out in the country, 50-ish miles from the city on the mountain, and have offered to let him stay with us, but he doesn't want to. He enjoys the lifestyle more than anything, I think. Substances and partying. It's hard to go from that to a normal, boring, everyday person with a job, bills to pay, and other responsibilities like family. I get it. Sort of. Story 25. I got pretty heavy into gangs at a young age. The reason I walked away was because I got locked up for 2 years at 14 and found out that my brothers for life were suddenly indifferent to my absence. Also, getting locked up at 14 forces some pretty heavy introspection, and I was lucky enough to find wisdom from my ignorant experiences. Further, I found that despite my actions at the time, I really didn't like hurting people. Story 26. Speaking for a friend because making him a throwaway account is too much effort. I can't speak for what gang he or she was part of. However, they were in the gang starting from age 14. They left a few years ago between the ages of 20 to 30. Range to conceal identity. They've been put on the gang registry list, and they say if they go back in time and talk to their 14-year-old self, they would force themselves not to join the gang. They say it was the worst decision they ever made. Every time he gets pulled over, which is about 4 times a month, sometimes 4 times a week, they get questioned and pestered by police purely because they are on the gang registry. Makes it almost impossible to find a job. And yes, it comes back to haunt said person. They're constantly watching their back because you don't just leave the gang he or she was part of. They want him or her gone. They say it was the worst decision of their life. Story 27. My boyfriend went to jail. I should have gone with him, but he claimed he was responsible for everything. He was very well known to police because of other gang stuff that had happened. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. It was time to get the heck out. I've cleaned my life up well and have a professional career now working in child protection, and I work part-time for a hotline. I've definitely encountered people from my past. Some of my clients have been people I used to sell substances to. For the most part, they're happy to see I'm doing well for myself. I was quite young back in my gang days. They keep most of it to themselves and we talk privately. I know a lot as much about their past as they do about mine, and so there's an acknowledgement there that people really can't change. And the past is the past. Story 28. I wouldn't call myself a former gang member, but when I was in high school in the summer after, I would do hood rat crap like sneak out at night and smoke backwoods and shoot guns with my friends. And if we found out somebody messed with our friends, we messed with them. We also did stuff like steal PS4 controllers from Walmart and sell them at the GameStop next door so we could buy substance or hop in a car if someone left their keys. I got accepted to the state university an hour away from my hometown, and financial aid is covering most of it, so now I'm trying to stay on the right path, as they say. When I go back in town, I try not to hang around with my old group too much because if I get arrested, my financial aid goes away. Basically, I would rather grow up and stop doing gang crap, so one day I can live in a better area than I grew up in. Story 29. My cousin was ended on my birthday. Crowd of people and no one saw crap. Another cousin found the guy that did it and ended him. When my cousin was ended, a number of us couldn't attend the funeral because we were on charges and couldn't be around others with charges. A few things happened before this that had me saying, I'm far too freaking smart for this crap, but that was really the icing on the cake. I made my mind up that I gotta get out. It officially ended when I got bagged for weapons possession 2 times, possession with intent 2 times, right in front of my own mother. I floated around the system while awaiting trial, and the god lawyer managed to get the intent to distribute dropped to possession and the weapons 2 times to possession of restricted. I ate a few months, and when I got out, I took the little money I had stacked, moved the heck away, went back to school, and the rest is near 20-year-old history. Story 30. I was in a gang for my whole youth, 12 to 18. Eventually left after finally realizing that I didn't want to be a follower or a lackey for some dumb freak who never even finished high school. Has it come back on me? Yes, numerous times. Seeing old homeboys or ex-rival gang members who still live in my area sometimes. You gotta fight for what you believe in, and I believe I'm not a pawn for some dude in Pelican Bay. I have family and friends who are still in that life, and it never really leaves you. I have a brother who still runs a gang, and it always bugs me to go to a barbecue or just to hang out because there are knuckleheads always there. But you deal with it, and move on to watch their own. It's not that I'm not down anymore, I'm just not down with them. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.